According to the Reuters news agency and English language Wikipedia, the 14th Dalai Lama, who is the spiritual leader of Tibetan Buddhists, turns 85. He has been in exile since 1959, because then many Tibetans rose against the Chinese, imposed Chinese rule, communist Chinese rule against them, and that uprising failed, and the Dalai Lama fled to India, where he currently still lives as a refugee, 61 years on. He has traveled the world and has spoken about the welfare of Tibetans, environment, economics, women's rights, nonviolence, interfaith or interreligious dialogue, physics, astronomy, Buddhism and science, cognitive neuroscience, reproductive health and sexuality, along with various topics of Mahayana and Vajrayana, which are two theological schools of thought in Buddhism, Buddhist teachings, two main theological schools of thought in that religion. He received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1989 and the US Congressional Gold Medal in 2006. And Time magazine named him one of the children of Mahatma Gandhi, that famous Indian lawyer and civil rights activist who strictly believed in non-violent non-cooperation with the British and was able step by step to lead India to a full independence from Britain in 1947. Tragically, just several months after that happened, a fanatical fellow Hindu killed him as he was going to a Hindu prayer meeting to pray for peace. That happened back in January 1948. And Gandhi's spiritual heir to nonviolence. So his real name is Lama, spelled Lhmo, Thondup, or Tondup, however it should be pronounced, spelled Thondup, and he was born on July the 6th, 1935 in Taktser, Amdo, Tibet. His official religion is the Gelug or Gilag or Gilag school of Tibetan Buddhism. So in October 1950, the Army of the People's Republic of China, which is the Communist China's official name, marched to the edge of the Dalai Lama's territory and sent a delegation after defeating a legion of the Tibetan army in warlord-controlled Kham. On November the 17th, 1950, at the age of just 15, the 14th Dalai Lama was enthroned formally as the temporal ruler of Tibet. The Panchen Lama and Dalai Lama had many conflicts throughout Tibetan history. Dalai Lama's formal rule was brief. He sent a delegation to China's capital, Beijing, which ratified the 17-point agreement for the peaceful liberation of Tibet. Later, he would claim that the delegation did so without having his authorization or formal permission. He did cooperate with the Chinese government. In September 1954, together with the 10th Panchen Lama, he went to the Chinese capital to meet the Chinese communist dictator Mao Zedong and to attend the first session of the National People's Congress, which is China's national parliament, as a delegate primarily discussing China's constitution. And in September 1954, he was even selected as a vice chairman of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress, a post which he officially held until 1964. In 1956, he visited India to celebrate the Buddha's birthday and asked the Indian Prime Minister, Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru, if he would allow him political asylum should he choose to stay. Nehru discouraged this as a provocation against peace and reminded him of the Indian government's non-interventionist stance agreed upon with its 1954 treaty with China. Long called a splittist, in other words, allegedly in favor of splitting the Tibetan territory, and traitor by China, or having split loyalties maybe. the Dalai Lama has attempted formal talks over Tibet's status in China. In 2019, after the United States passed a law requiring the US to deny visas to Chinese officials in charge of implementing policies that restrict foreigners' access to Tibet, it's still one of the world's most restricted regions to even visit. The US ambassador to China encouraged the Chinese government to engage in substantive dialogue with the Dalai Lama or his representatives, without preconditions, to seek a settlement that resolves differences. The Chinese Foreign Ministry has warned the US and other countries to shun, in other words, ignore the Dalai Lama during visits, and often uses trade negotiations and human rights talks as an incentive to do so. The Dalai Lama is also a target of Chinese state-sponsored hacking. As the Tibetan uprising was starting in March 1959, the Dalai Lama, who feared that he would be killed, along with his servants, fled Tibet. Servants and assistants fled Tibet with the help of the CIA's Special Activities Division. So for the last 61 years and counting, since March the 30th, 1959, the Dalai Lama has been in exile. He has established the government of Tibet in exile in Dharamshala, India, which is often referred to as Little Lhasa. After the founding of the government in exile, he re-established the approximately 80,000 Tibetan refugees who followed him into exile in agricultural settlements. He created a Tibetan educational system to teach the Tibetan children their language, history, religion, and culture. The Tibetan Institute of Performing Arts was established in 1959, and the Central Institute of Higher Tibetan Studies became the primary university for Tibetans in India in 1967. At the Congressional Human Rights Caucus in 1987 in Washington, D.C., the Dalai Lama gave a speech outlining his ideas for the future status of Tibet. The plan demanded Tibet to become, or demanded China to make Tibet a democratic zone of peace without nuclear weapons and with support for human rights. The plan would be known as the Strasbourg Proposal because the Dalai Lama expanded on the plan at Strasbourg in France, on the German border, Strasbourg being one of the three capitals of the European Union, along with Brussels and Luxembourg City, on June the 15th, 1988. Giving public talks for non-Buddhist audiences and interviews and teaching Buddhism to large public audiences all over the world, in addition to private groups at his residence in India, appears to be the Dalai Lama's main activity. Despite his advanced age, he maintains a busy international lecture and teaching schedule. His public talks and teachings are usually broadcast live on the internet in multiple languages via an inviting organization's website or on the Dalai Lama's own website. Tens of his past teaching videos can be viewed there, as well as public talks, conferences, interviews, dialogues, and panel discussions. In his famous essay, The Ethic of Compassion, written in 1999, he expresses his belief that if we only reserve compassion for those whom we love, we are ignoring the responsibility of sharing these characteristics of respect and empathy with those whom we do not have relationships with, or with whom we don't have relationships, which cannot allow us to cultivate love. In his opinion or conviction, although it takes time to develop a higher level of compassion, eventually we will recognize that the quality of empathy will become a part of life and promote our quality as humans and inner strength. The Dalai Lama met the late Pope, or head of the Roman Catholic Church, Paul VI, at the Vatican in 1973. He met the late Pope John Paul II in 1980, 1982, 1986, 1988, 1990, and 2003. In 1990, he met a delegation of Jewish teachers in Dharamshala for an extensive inter-religious dialogue. He has since visited Israel 3 times. In 2006, he met the former Pope Benedict XVI privately. He also has met the Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. Robert Runcie, and other leaders of the Anglican Church in London. Gordon B. Hinckley, who at the time was the president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, commonly known as the Mormon Church, as well as senior Eastern Orthodox Church, Muslim, Hindu, Jewish, and Sikh officials. The Dalai Lama also belongs to the Board of World Religious Leaders as part of the Elijah Interfaith Institute and participated in the third meeting of the Board of World Religious Leaders in Amritsar, India, in November 2007 to discuss the topic of love and forgiveness. The Dalai Lama has throughout his long life been interested in science and technology, dating from his childhood in Lhasa, Tibet, when he was fascinated by mechanical objects like clocks, watches, telescopes, film projectors, clockwork soldiers, and motor cars, and loved to repair, disassemble, and reassemble them. The Dalai Lama uses various meditation techniques, including analytic meditation. In his opinion or conviction, the aim of meditation is to maintain a very full state of alertness and mindfulness, and then try to see the natural state of your consciousness. As a Buddhist, he opposes abortion, although he has clarified that in certain cases, abortion could be considered ethically acceptable if the unborn child will be retarded or if the birth will create serious problems for the parent. But these exceptions should be allowed only on a case-by-case basis. The Dalai Lama says that he is active in spreading India's message of non-violence and religious harmony throughout the world. The Dalai Lama advocates compassion for animals and frequently urges people to try vegetarianism or at least to reduce their consumption of meat. The Dalai Lama has openly called himself a Marxist. So not only a socialist, in other words, a believer in an economic system where most means of production and distribution are owned by the government, but also a bit leftist, a communist in terms of social economic theory, although he ironically also supports democracy. So he's not a typical Marxist socialist. In his opinion, of all the modern economic theories, the economic system of Marxism, he stated this in 1993, is founded on moral principles, while capitalism is concerned only with gain and profitability. He sincerely is concerned about the environmental problems, frequently giving public lectures on themes related to the environment. A monk since childhood, the Dalai Lama has said that sex offers fleeting satisfaction and leads to trouble later, while chastity offers a better life and more independence, more freedom. He has advocated gender equality, and in 2009 he proclaimed that by nature women are more compassionate based on their biology and ability to nurture and give birth to children. In April 2013, at the Culture of Compassion event in Derry, Northern Ireland, Britain, he stated that warm-heartedness is a key factor for healthy individuals, healthy families, and healthy communities. In March 2020, in the middle of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, he released a statement published in Time magazine entitled "Prayer is Not Enough, the Dalai Lama on Why We Need to Fight Coronavirus with Compassion." In 2016 and again in 2018, he expressed the opinion that there are too many refugees in Europe, and in his opinion, Europe belongs to the Europeans. In May 2011, the Dalai Lama retired from the Central Tibetan administration. In September 2011, the Dalai Lama promised to consult around the age of 90, so approximately in 2025, the High Lamas of the Tibetan Buddhist traditions, the Tibetan public, and other concerned people who follow Tibetan Buddhists, and reevaluate whether the institution of the Dalai Lama should continue or not. And they would together make a decision on that basis.